One thing that I learned in my lucid dreaming is that the power of belief and expectation is really important. So like if you're in a lucid dream and you see somebody and you think, oh, that they're going to hurt me or something, then suddenly they'll turn around and they'll have a gun or a knife or whatever. But if you saw the same person and in the lucid dream thought, oh, I bet they're a priest or something, then they'll turn around and they'll be wearing a clerical collar and holding the Bible and all that kind of stuff. So what you begin to see really quick is that your beliefs and expectations get reflected out there in the lucid dream state. And so sometimes the problem isn't that your lucid dream is full of troublesome issues. It's that you've developed a mindset, a belief system that where you expect threats all the time or expect trouble all the time. And so really, as you get into lucid dreaming, you really have to kind of examine your own mindset. And oftentimes it'll explain why you're having the dreams you're having. I'm Robert Waggoner. I'm the author of two books, Lucid Dreaming, Gateway to the Inner Self, and also Lucid Dreaming, Plain and Simple, which I co-authored with Carolyn McCready. So I got into dreaming long ago when I was really young. Probably what happened is I started to have precognitive dreams as a kid. And I just wondered, how can you have precognitive dreams? It just seems so wild. And then later, I taught myself a way to become consciously aware or lucidly aware in the dream state. And I started running with that. And then about 5 or 6 years later, the scientific evidence came out. So I've really always had a deep interest in dreams and psychology and lucid dreaming. And so I've just stayed with it all these years.
What kind of precognitive dreams were you having?
Sometimes it was kind of funny. In the dream, someone would say an interesting sentence. It was just an odd sentence. And then, I'd wake up, I'd remember, boy, that was kind of an odd thing to have a dream character say. And then 6 hours later, I'd be on the playground with my elementary school friends. And one of them would say the exact same words that dream figure said. And I was like blown away. I was just like, whoa, how do you do that? And then I had other occasions. Like I remember one time, I was probably 10 or 11. One time I began to see the moon move from the south to the north. I watched it do that 3 times. And a voice behind me said, this means that 3 years will pass before the incidents in this dream occur. And I was like, whoa, this is wild. And so I paid attention to that dream. And 3 years later, the incidents occurred. It was just totally trippy. So when you get in touch with that kind of larger awareness, that kind of makes you realize, hey, something more is going on here.
Yeah, that's incredible. And I've had similar experiences with precognitive dreams where sometimes it's something so random in the dream that seems insignificant, and then it happens exactly how it happened in the dream. What do you think that means? Like, is it sometimes just like a random, non-significant moment, or do you think that they're like trying to tell us something to prepare us for something bigger, or could it be both?
I think in one way, it's a little bit of both. First, I think dreams kind of show us that the world isn't exactly this linear thing that we all take it to be. We think of time, it's minute after minute and so on, but that's not really how time is set up. And so I think dreaming is kind of trying to help us sometimes kind of break free from these limiting ideas, limiting beliefs that we have, so that we can really kind of come to understand the actual nature of reality. So that's what I really thank my dreams for early on. They just made me question things like, how do you have precognitive dreams? How does that work? What does that mean about the nature of time? And that really set me on my path.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I resonate a lot with that because from my experience, you can see the future in your dreams. You can see your past and work through the past. You can work on your present day moments and issues and things like that. So I think that, dreams are not, like you said, they're not stuck with linear time like we are in our waking life. So we're able to access different time periods and get little glimpses of things, not the full picture, but, little glimpses of things. And I think the more that you're able to recognize that, like you said, you can work on that. I think that's super cool.
Yeah, it just meant the world to me, and that's how I got so deeply interested in dreams.
Cool. So you started to practice lucid dreaming, you mentioned. How much experience and practice did you get until you were able to write a whole book about it?
I probably had been a lucid dreamer for 30 years before I decided to write a book on lucid dreaming. And I remember one time being at a dream conference, and a woman I admired, she said that it took her 25 years before she really understood lucid dreaming. So sometimes I think you got to really take a deep dive, go really far down the path before you really understand it. But if you can imagine this, I was a junior in high school, and I taught myself a technique. I basically kind of invented a technique to become lucidly aware. And so this was before the scientific evidence was even out there. And it was really wild to be able to lucid dream before the science even said it was possible.
That's awesome. What can you share the technique that you invented?
Yeah, it was really simple. I was reading a book by Carlos Castaneda, and he was a UCLA graduate student who was trying to study psychoactive plants like peyote and mescaline and all. So he'd gone down to southern Arizona, and he meets this shaman named Don Juan, who says he'll teach him about psychoactive plants. But in this book called Journey to Ixtlan, he's teaching them all sorts of things, but hardly anything about psychoactive plants. Anyway, so in the book, Don Juan tells Carlos, you should try to find your hands in the dream state and become aware of dreaming. And I'm reading that thinking, like, what? You can become aware in a dream? That's crazy. And so I started to look and see, is there a technique here? But there wasn't a technique. So what I did, I knew about the power of suggestion. And so each night before I'd go to sleep, I would just look at the palm of my hands while telling myself softly in my head, tonight in my dreams, I'll see my hands and realize I'm dreaming. Tonight in my dreams, I'll see my hands and realize I'm dreaming. Tonight in my dreams, I'll see my hands and realize I'm dreaming. And on the third night of doing this, so I do it for about 5 minutes before I went to sleep. On the third night, I'm walking through the hallway of my high school, and suddenly my hands pop right in front of my face, and I was blown away. I go, oh my God, this is a dream. And it was so wild to realize those football player guys over there, hey, they're dream figures. And so I reached over to touch the wall, and it was cool and nubby, just like the concrete wall should be in that hallway. And so I stepped out of the building by the administrative building, and I did something that Don Juan told Carlos not to do. I started looking at the details on the brick, and I thought, look at this. Look how detailed this imagery is. Look at this. And all of a sudden, the lucid dream got shaky, and then a weird thing happened. I became a little ball of awareness floating through the palm print of my hand, and the palm print of my hand was like the Grand Canyon. And so I knew now I was this little ball of awareness just floating through the palm print of my own hand. And that went on for a while, and then boom, I got back to my original size, decided to go flying, got so excited I woke up. But that was my first consciously induced lucid dream.
That's awesome. I love that. And it's crazy how now your hands are such a big part of like reality checks and becoming lucid, and they're so widely used nowadays. I think that's super cool. And I find it so fascinating how within that dream you experience like different points of views and things that obviously we can't experience in our waking life. That's super interesting.
Yeah, it was really interesting. And you know, you're right about the symbolism of the hand, because like a lot of times if you'd go to a palm reader, they would read your future by looking at your hands. And so when you sit there staring at your hands, telling yourself, tonight my dreams will see my hands and realize I'm dreaming, it's kind of like in a one way and you might even be staring at your hands are symbolic of your personality, your future, your life, and all. So anyway, it's a funny thing, but that's how I did it. And
Super cool.
I that got me on the path. And then about 5 years later, the scientific evidence came out.
I love it. I love it. Yeah, I mean, your hands are like how we experience the world, and I love what you said about how when you're lucid in a dream and you're feeling textures and things like that. Like it always blows my mind how like concrete feels like concrete would feel, and all these textures are so vivid. I do wonder though, why did he say to Carlos Castaneda not to do that in a dream? Do you know?
But what he told him, he goes, what you don't want to do is stare at something in a dream fixedly. And so there I was studying the details on the brickwork on the administration building. And so I was actually staring at it. And so I think one thing that goes on, normally when we dream, we have rapid eye movement, like our eyes are moving left and right and up and down and all. And so I think a little bit in a lucid dream, I've noticed, and a lot of people have said this, is that when you stare at something, oftentimes it causes the lucid dream to collapse. and or something weird will happen. So anyway, I think part of dreaming, we have this physiological rapid eye movement, and so the dream just prefers that you continue in the way of dreaming and have rapid
Gotcha.
eye movement.
Yeah, it makes sense. I think, definitely dream stabilization is like a skill in it of itself when it comes to lucid dreaming. Sometimes dreams just get weak or dreams change. And even though you have full lucid control, sometimes it seems like the dream has like an agenda of its own that you just kind of got to go with, I've noticed.
Yeah, what I tell people, oftentimes people talk about, oh, in a lucid dream you can control everything. What I say is I think it's better, you can influence things, you can manipulate things, but I tell people really lucid dreaming to me means that you're more aware and able to relate to what's going on in the dream with greater awareness. So
Yeah.
it's not so much about having perfect control. It's more about being aware that you're relating to your unconscious mind in a way.
That's true. Yeah. And it's just so cool to be aware of the dream environment that you're in, knowing that your body is asleep somewhere. And even if you can't control the dream, like sometimes one of my favorite things to do while lucid is to just observe as a conscious observer. And like a lot of times the dream lasts longer when I do that too.
Yeah. So it's really amazing, and there's different techniques you can use to elongate the dream and all that kind of stuff. But normally in a lucid dream, I'll have an experiment I want to perform or something I want to do, and oftentimes when I get the results, I tell myself to wake up
Yeah.
before I forget things.
Yeah, that's smart. That's smart. Cool. So when the research started to pop up and science started to look at this on like a bigger picture, like how did that feel for you? I imagine that was so exciting to feel like, oh, I'm not crazy. This is something interesting here.
You're absolutely right. It was January of 1981. The Psychology Today had come out, and so I was on the university campus working on my psychology degree. And to get out of the cold, I went into the library and walked over to the magazines, and I saw this article by Stephen LaBerge about how he had provided scientific evidence for lucid dreaming, and it just blew my mind. I really was the happiest person because for years I've been telling my friends, "Hey, I'm becoming consciously aware of my dream," and they say, "Oh no, you're having a dream about a dream," or something like that. And I say, "No, I'm really aware." And so I taught some of my friends my technique, and then they had their own lucid dreams and realized that I wasn't making all this up. But yeah,
Yeah.
it was a great moment to have the scientific evidence come out, because then you could talk about it with other people without and point to the science and say, this is totally legit. This isn't a made up
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah, for sure. And what was Stephen LaBerge doing at the time? I mean, I know it's evolved so much, but at the time it must have been like super new.
He had already had his own lucid dream, so he knew it existed. So he was a graduate student at Stanford, and he began to think that, oh, in regular dreaming, we have rapid eye movement. And so maybe you could bring someone into the sleep lab and tell them, hey, when you become consciously aware of dreaming, when you have a lucid dream, then move your eyes left to right 8 times. And we can record that on the rapid eye movement polygraph pads, and it'll provide evidence for lucid dreaming. And so actually, he brought himself into the sleep lab. And over the course of 20 nights in the sleep lab, he did this, a number of times and provided that evidence. But I'll tell you, when the evidence came out, it was really controversial. People hated the idea that you could become consciously aware in the dream state. There are a lot of old-time Freudians and old-time Jungians and all who really didn't see the potential in lucid dreaming and just thought it was micro awakenings or, some weird artifact. But then laboratories all around the world could do the same thing, and they finally had to accept that it existed.
Yeah, that's interesting. It's lucid dreaming is one of those things that it's really hard to explain to somebody who has never experienced it. And then when I see somebody for the first time have their first lucid dream and their mind is just blown, I love seeing that, then they really understand what we're talking about.
Yeah. And he went on to do a lot more research on various aspects of lucid dreaming and help people kind of see the neurophysiology of lucid dreaming, what parts of the brain light up and various things. And so he really helped establish the science of it. But the interesting thing about lucid dreaming, for thousands of years, other cultures have been talking about lucid dreaming. A lot of Native American, really shamanic cultures all around the world have been talking about lucid dreaming. Buddhists have Buddhist dream yoga that they've been using for 2,000 years. It's in Taoism. Been in Sufism for about 1,000 years. So it's really gone around the world, but for so many years, it was just considered a spiritual technique, and no one knew if it was on the up and up, if anyone could do it, and what the deal was. And so that's the great thing, is it's like this spiritual thing that finally got scientific acceptability.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's kind of the beauty, I think, of lucid dreaming.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, same thing happened with meditation in the past 10 years. Now we're seeing all the benefits and possibilities and things like that. And I have noticed with lucid dreaming, some people have natural, spontaneous lucid dreams as children. Some people have to train themselves. But for the most part, I've noticed that everybody's capable. It just might take some practice and some patience.
Yeah, that's for sure.
It must be so exciting now to see how much awesome research there is in there. I'm a spiritual person, but I love evidence-based research. So seeing all the science nowadays, all the cool things we've discovered, people have been able to communicate through dreamers in the lab, through this, while they're sleeping. There's just so much cool research out there now. So I love that.
Yeah.
Now that you've been lucid dreaming for such a long time, what are some of your favorite things to do when you get lucid?
Well, when I talk with people and give workshops and all, I always say that, in a lucid dream, you have the ability to access creativity or inner creativity. And so a lot of times that's just totally mind-blowing. Then also I tell people you can use lucid dreaming for emotional healing, and also I believe for physical healing as well. There's some incredible examples of that. And then I also tell people that you can use lucid dreaming to interact with what I call your larger awareness. And so this is something I learned about 10 years after I started lucid dreaming, that you can stop in a lucid dream and just ask a question of the dream. And oftentimes you'll hear a response, or the lucid dream will change in response and answer your question in that way. And so that's just totally far out. And then there's a lot of spiritual practices you can do. You can meditate in a lucid dream. Oftentimes that's a total mind blower, because it's like 50 times more intense than a waking meditation. It's like, wow, you go so deep so quick. It's like, oh my God. And so there's all these things that you can do in lucid dreaming. So I just kind of go with whatever I'm feeling at the moment, unless I'm trying to do an experiment, and I just do my best to go in it deep. But probably more often than not, though, is I reach out to the larger awareness. I just stop in the dream, and that's what I do.
That's cool. A lot of people might not realize that you can talk to the dream itself. That's super cool. Do you always get you never know what you're going to get, right? Or how does a dream usually react?
Yeah, I think it's really a way of interacting with the unconscious mind. And that's why I call my first book Lucid Dreaming: Gateway to the Inner Self, because the way I discovered this is 10 years after I started lucid dreaming, I was part of an experimental group, and every month we had goals to achieve, the same goal. And so one month it was find out what the dream figures in your lucid dream represent. And so I thought, that's pretty easy. I can do that. And so I was away on a business trip in Chicago. I remembered, I have to send in my report. So I became lucid that night, followed a woman into an office, saw an older gentleman there, and I just walked up to him and said, "Hey, what do you represent?" And all of a sudden, the strangest thing happened. A voice from above the guy boomed out a partial response. And that just blew my mind, but it was only a partial response. So I looked up into, just nothing, and asked, what? Tell me more. And then it boomed out the whole response of what this guy represented. And I thought, okay, I've done the task. I got to wake up and write this down so I can submit it. But in the morning, I thought, why didn't the dream figure respond? Why did this invisible voice from above respond? And then I began to wonder, is there an awareness behind the dream? And so after that, in a lot of my lucid dreams, I'd become lucid, I'd ignore the dream figures, ignore the dream setting, and I'd just look up and ask a question. And sometimes I'd ask to experience a concept, and those were the ones that I just had my mind blown. It was just like a concept I'd read about in a book. I'd ask to experience it. And then when I began to experience it, it was like, whoa, I didn't know how powerful this could be. And so the beautiful thing is a lot of people began to do this as well. And but in my book, I really show that this larger awareness also is very caring too. sometimes you'll request something and it'll say something like, you don't seem ready for the magnitude of what you're asking for. I mean, it's basically telling you, you're asking for something too powerful. You should stand back. So that's the beautiful thing about interacting with this awareness behind the dream. It's just so creative and so caring. It's just a mind blower.
Yeah, that's incredible. I mean, yeah, it really is our subconscious mind. So it makes sense that it knows deep down what we need and show us the dream where we need it and kind of helps us, curate the dream environment for us.
Right. And I think it helps you begin to see that how we kind of co-create the dream. Because a lot of times in a lucid dream, I can make something happen. If I want to see a red Corvette when I open up the garage door, I can open up the garage door and there'll be a red Corvette. But then a lot of times there's stuff that's totally unexpected that happens. And that's when you really get your mind blown. And I think that's when this larger awareness is kind of inserting something to kind of make you think a little bit bigger and kind of think outside the box.
Yeah, for sure. I like this saying that goes, you can control the ship, but not the sea, which means, like it's just such a bigger awareness that we don't necessarily always understand.
Right, exactly.
Cool. So there is also a chapter in your book about shared dreaming, right? Or mutual dreaming. So that leads me kind of to that question, like in terms of co-creating the space, like if shared dreaming is a real possible thing, then it's not just my subconscious we're dealing with, it's mine and whoever I'm dreaming with, right? So how does that work? And like, I know maybe science hasn't fully understood that yet, but like, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so in that chapter, I talk about some experiments I did with some expert lucid dreamers, Ed Kellogg and Linda Magillon. And what we tried to do on certain nights, we would try to meet up in a lucid dream. But oftentimes what would happen, one of us would become lucid, but the other person wouldn't become lucid. But they'd be able to describe something about the other person. And in the morning, we could compare notes and see that, oh, yeah, that actually the dream had meshed, or the lucid dreamer had found out something about the non-lucid dreamer. Like for one night, I remember my friend Ed called up and he said, okay, tell me about your dreams last night. And so I started telling him, and he goes, okay, that one there with you at the table. At the table, the person sitting across from you, was that a guy in a blue suit with a certain color tie and glasses and everything? I go, yeah, that's incredible. Wow, Ed. And then Ed would say, okay, who's standing to your right? Is that a woman at the table? And I go, yeah, it's a woman. And then Ed would say, was she wearing this, this, and this? And I go, yeah, that's incredible, Ed. You nailed it. And then Ed would say, well, okay, so who's to your left at the table? And I'd say, I know it's a guy, but I just didn't really look at him very well. And Ed goes, well, that was me in your dream. And that's why I know what the other people were wearing in the space there. And so when you have moments like that, you really realize that on occasion, and I would say it's relatively rare, 99% of the time you're interacting with dream figures, projections of your mind, but on occasion, people share the same dream space. And in lucid dreaming, you can play around with this a little bit and do your own personal experiments. But I think it'll be a long time before science gets to that level of experimentation.
Yeah, it's definitely hard to measure, but like you said, there are some undeniable anecdotal examples. And like, I'm building a community of lucid dreamers and dream lovers, and we always experiment with each other and have different dream goals and things like that. So I know exactly, what you're talking about. And it's so cool when we have like these types of experiences where we have a similar dream and we're trying to give each other keywords in the dream and things like that to just add to the evidence out there, because I definitely think that, science is eventually going to catch on to it.
Yeah, I think one thing that really blew my mind one time, I had a friend out in the Bay Area, Maureen, who everyone called Mo. And one night I became lucidly aware in a dream, and I was in a restaurant just admiring the details of everything. And suddenly through the door walks Mo. And I run up to her and I said, Mo, this is a dream. We're dreaming this. Do you realize that? And here's the funny thing. She still had rapid eye movement. And that made me aware that she's in her own dream. She's not in my dream. She's in her own dream.
Interesting.
And so I thought, how could I help her become lucidly aware? And then I thought, oh, I'll make her float with me. So I grabbed her around the waist and we started floating up in the restaurant. I said, look, Mo, we're floating. This is a dream. But still she had rapid eye movement and I wasn't getting through to her. So this is what I did. I put my fingers in a peace sign and I shoved it in her face. And I said, do you see this peace sign? You can use it as a symbol to become lucidly aware anytime you want. And then I woke up. So in the morning, I thought, oh, she'll send me an email. She'll send me a note or something. She'll call me, but nothing happened. So I didn't tell anyone this lucid dream. And about 3 months later, I was out in the Bay Area on a business trip. And I called up Mo and said, hey, do you want to get together, have lunch or something? And she told me where to meet her in Burlingame. And so I was standing outside the restaurant. And so now we're in waking reality, standing outside the restaurant. Here comes Mo walking down the sidewalk. And right as she gets up to me, she puts her fingers in a peace sign and shoves it in my face, just like I had done in the lucid dream to her. And I asked her, I said, Mo, why are you doing that? And she says, I don't know. I just really felt like it. And
What?
so
That's crazy.
So I mean, that's how crazy it is. It's like her subconscious mind remembered the whole thing.
Yeah.
She on a conscious level didn't understand it, but she did exactly what I did to her in the lucid dream, but she did it in the waking world. So when you
Wow.
have moments like that, you realize, dreaming and lucid dreaming really shakes up our view of the world.
Yeah.
Things are much more mysterious than we normally think.
That's true. And it just makes me wonder so much. That story is incredible. Like, there's so many layers to conscious awareness, first of all. And the way that it seeps into our daily lives, we don't even realize that dreams have such an impact on our waking life so subconsciously,
Right,
Super
exactly.
cool. Yeah, my brother and I had a similar experience actually because he's a lucid dreamer as well, not as experienced as I am. But I did have a dream where, he was there and I was trying to get him to get lucid. I was like, "Hey, you're in my dream. Like, look, we can do this. We can fly around." Like similar to yours, I was showing him cool dream stuff and I didn't know how to get him to get lucid and I didn't know if it was going to work, but I remember looking into his eyes thinking that would like, get to his soul or something. And that was what my
Right.
intuition told me to do. And then like the next day he told me like, oh, I didn't even prompt it or anything. He's like, oh, I had a dream about you. But I was trying to become, it's like I was trying to become lucid, but I was like semi-lucid. And then I just went, didn't become lucid, but it kind of felt like I was trying to become lucid. So I was like, oh, well, I was trying to get you lucid. So that seems like a similar shared dream right there.
Yeah. No, I think someday someone will figure this out and there'll be some scientific evidence emerge. But one thing I would say, if I was a lucid dreamer on the lucid dreaming path, I wouldn't make shared lucid dreaming a big time goal. I think it's much better to access creativity, to get in touch with your larger awareness and those kind of things. Shared lucid dreaming is something you want to get to after you've been doing this for 20 years or something.
For sure. It's definitely more complex and it requires somebody else to be interested in it as well. And like you said, yeah, there's definitely a lot of personal inner work that can be done first that we can get so many benefits from. So why don't you tell me like a little bit about your books and like where people can find them? I actually have one of them, this one.
Okay, yeah, that's my first book, Lucid Dreaming:
Yeah.
Gateway to the Inner Self. It's in like its 15th printing, been translated into like 8 different languages, and always been all around the world. But after I wrote it, what I was trying to do is just get people to see lucid dreaming in a bigger way. It's more than having fun with dream figures and flying around and doing weird stuff. There's really powerful things you can do with it. And then so people wrote me and said, well, what are the techniques you're using? And that's when I wrote this second book, Lucid Dreaming, Plain and Simple, with my co-author, Carolyn McCready. There, I just given all the techniques about how to become lucid, how to stabilize the lucid dream, how to explore and experiment in a thoughtful way so you can really have your mind blown. And so that's kind of the companion book to the first book. But yeah,
Awesome.
they can always find out about what I'm up to at lucidadvice.com. And also, I've been creating a free online magazine called The Lucid Dreaming Experience. And if you go to luciddreamingmagazine.com, you can check that out as well.
I love your magazine as well. I actually had a dream featured in there. I'm not sure if you
Oh,
remembered in it,
wow.
but one of my favorite lucid dreams was featured in it. So I'll link it so the listeners can check it out.
Oh, well, cool. That's
Yeah.
great.
Yeah, it
Thanks.
was a very spiritual, like one of my life-changing lucid dreams. So I recommend people read it. So one of the things I wanted to ask about your book was, so I heard that there was a chapter you removed, maybe the world wasn't ready for it, was it about reincarnation and dreams? Or why don't you tell me about it? Is this true?
Yeah. So my editor who asked me to write a book, so I finished the book, I sent it all to her, and she said, well, Today on National Public Radio, I heard that there had been a Gallup poll where they found out that only 1 in 4 Americans believed in past lives or reincarnation. And you have this chapter on past lives or reincarnation in lucid dreams. And so I think I'm just going to take that out of the book because your book's getting kind of long. And, if only 1 in 4 Americans believe in it in that area, it's just not important to people. And so she gave that chapter back to me.
Okay, well, yeah, maybe at the time, but it's definitely gaining interest now. What do you think about that? Like, do you think that dreams can show us glimpses of past lives? Do you think that's a thing? Like, what are your personal thoughts?
This was probably one of the dreams that blew my mind when I was a young teenager. I was probably 13 or 14. So imagine this. I find myself looking through the eyes of this older gentleman who's wearing this big, heavy wool coat, and he's sitting in his apartment, and I can tell it's Europe, and there's like gas lights on the walls. So there's a period around 1900 where they used natural gas to create light in houses. And in his hand, he has a glass of red wine. And so here I am, I'm, little Robert Waggoner, I'm age 13. I've never had wine in my family. We didn't drink alcohol or have any of that. And so all of a sudden, this guy brings up this glass of red wine and takes this sip of it, and the flavor explodes in my mouth. And I woke up thinking, whoa, what was that? Is that what wine really tastes like? I mean, I've probably, since that time, only had like 4 or 5 times when the wine's been that good that it kind of burst in your mouth. But at that time, it made me start to think, wow, am I connected to this guy? Because I could tell that he was like a merchant in like Rotterdam, and that the harbor was right behind him in the apartment. And later in that chapter that I excluded, in a lucid dream, I went to look for this guy and actually found him. And it was so wild to see his face instead of looking through his eyes to see his face.
Wow.
And realize that, oh my gosh, I'm connected with this guy in another life experience. But that's what I realized, that lucid dreaming is really this powerful, that you can actually, if you know how to go about it, begin to explore this area of personality, of the faceted personality.
Yeah, interesting. When you went back, did you talk to the guy? Did you get any info?
Well, I should have. I should have asked some questions and got some more info. I was just stunned to see his face because I had seen his face in a regular dream, and it was wild to see his face, now that I was lucidly aware and able to understand who he was. But another instance occurred one time. I found myself looking through the eyes of a woman, and she was in this cabin, and she climbed up a few steps of the stairway and looked out this little, just tiny glass window, and I could see this harbor. And so Robert me asked, "Where is this?" And I hear the word Gloucester. And so she's looking out the window, and I'm thinking, boy, this is weird. She's looking to the south, and that's where the mouth of the harbor is. I thought that was kind of interesting. But I could feel how intelligent and also how kind of bitter and sarcastic this woman was. And she was carrying this really heavy white cloth, and I couldn't figure out what that was. Anyway, I woke up from that. And so the first thing I ran to do was get a map because I didn't know where Gloucester Harbor was. I knew Gloucester was in Massachusetts someplace. And darned if the harbor doesn't open to the south. And then I realized ever since I was a little kid, I always had a dislike for the Boston area, and which is like 30 minutes from Gloucester. And I was a kid who grew up in the middle of Kansas. And so why a kid from Kansas doesn't like, the Boston area, that was hard to figure out. And then I realized, oh my God, that woman, what she was holding was sailcloth, that she repaired the sails, because when I looked out into the harbor, I could see tall ships with their sails down, moored at a certain place in the harbor. But it was funny. I was giving a workshop in Boston about 10 years ago, and so I decided to go to Gloucester. I found the exact spot where this cabin was, and it was literally 50 yards west of the first British fort encampment there on one of the beaches there. And when I found the place, there were all these crows in a nearby tree they just went crazy, cawing and everything. It was one trippy
And
experience.
you've never seen that place ever in your life.
That I had never ever been there
That's not proof. I don't know what
in my
is.
waking life. So anyway, I think that's the other thing that lucid dreaming helped me with, because I grew up in kind of a traditional Christian family, and you kind of have this idea that, oh, you just have one life and then you die and you get judged and all this stuff. But by having these experiences, I began to think, I think there's really you get more times at the rodeo than just once, and so it gives you a chance to kind of grow and mature and learn about things and see things from different perspectives too. Because seeing how that woman, they had Puritans came with that first group of people who settled at Gloucester. It finally gave me some insight in what it's like to be a woman and also be kind of oppressed by the system. And I never would have understood that in the same way if I hadn't looked through her eyes and kind of felt her experience and how it touched her. It really opened my eyes to a lot of things.
Yeah, that is so incredible. It's such a great perspective to have. And I did a previous podcast episode with a parapsychologist who studied, all of the scientific signs of reincarnation. And he talked about similar things about how there's so many confirmed cases, what's considered a confirmed case is like children who remember specific details in their dreams of like warships and locations and things that a toddler would not know, and then they tell
Right.
their parents and then they look them up and turn out to be confirmed of somebody that actually existed. Like, that's crazy to me.
Right. And that was a beautiful thing about seeing the landscape, because when I saw the landscape, I could see the mouth of the harbor, I could see where the boats were moored, and it all made sense. And to go back, so that got settled like around 1660 or so, and to go 350 years later and see it for real. The landscape really hadn't changed that much, and it
That's
was
so cool.
truly wild, truly wild.
That's
Yeah.
incredible. So, as the dreamer, because I know everybody dreams differently. For me, most of the time, like I am myself, occasionally I'll have a dream where I'm playing somebody else, or I'm not even a person, I'm just observing the dream. What's that like for you? What type of POV do you usually dream in?
Yeah, you can be the actor, the reactor, the observer, kind of hovering from above. But one thing I've really found fascinating is in a lucid dream, find a mirror and look in the mirror and see what is reflected back to you. Because about half the time I'll see Robert me, but about the other half the time I'll see a whole different character, and I will be stunned. And this is something that a lot of other experienced lucid dreamers have done. They've looked in mirrors, and they're finding much the same thing, that about half the time it's not them looking back at themselves. They're seeing a whole different character. So it really makes you wonder, in a lucid dream, are you, or are you one of these other aspects? What's going on there exactly? And does the mirror tell you the truth? Does it truly reflect who or what's going on there? But yeah, it brings up a lot of questions, that's for sure.
So many questions, an entire rabbit hole of questions for sure. Yeah, I've noticed that too. Like, I've looked in the mirror and I've been some random man before, so like, but I thought I was me up until that point, so I don't know.
Yeah, exactly. That's what it's like.
So what about other characters in our dreams? Like, I know that we've all, like, as a lucid dreamer, you're bound to have some interesting interactions with dream characters. And nowadays on social media, there's a lot of like trendy clickbaits going around. A lot of people like will say like, "Oh, don't bother your dream characters. Don't ask them what day it is because the dream will turn into a nightmare," and all this stuff,
Yeah.
which is hilarious. I love experimenting with dream characters. But what have you found, like, in terms of how to treat dream characters and who they are and what are they made out of?
Yeah, so basically you have two ideas. Either a dream character is a projection of yourself, of your own mental and emotional energy, or a dream character is like somebody who's now in your dream space, or an actual person, or something like that. But here's the way that I've figured out how to determine that question in a rational way. Like, like if I meet an angry dream figure in a lucid dream, I'll send it what it lacks. If it's full of hate, I'll send it love. If it feels unwelcomed, then I'll welcome it. And normally when you change your mind about it and send it, love energy or compassion or understanding, all of a sudden it'll begin to shrink and it won't be angry or mean anymore. It'll be just a little kid who wants a hug. Or if you totally accept it, then something really wild will happen. It'll become light, and that light will probably enter you because you're the projector of that energy, and now you've accepted it. And so now the energy is coming back to you. So if you ever meet a witch or a zombie or whatever, I would assume those are dream symbols and dream figures, and I would respond to them by sending them love and compassion. Then you'll watch them change, and you'll realize, oh, as my mind changes, they change. So they're actually a product of my mind.
True.
So, but when it comes to other figures, so like meeting a deceased relative or something, so are they a symbol of my grief, or are they a person in the after death state? And so in my book, I have a chapter on that. And so I suggest asking questions like, if you meet a deceased loved one, a deceased relative, ask them a question like, who's going to be the next person in the family who's going to have a baby? And you don't know that. They don't, and if they tell you, oh, it's your niece so-and-so, she's going to have a baby in 2 years, then you have to wait 2 years to see if that turns out to be the case. But that's about the only way that I've been able to figure out, kind of differentiate between projection of my mind or something probably more valid in the spiritual realm.
Yeah, it makes sense. It definitely takes a lot of personal experimentation and exploration. And I've noticed that I kind of share a similar belief. I believe it can be both. Sometimes our dream characters are just regurgitations of our subconscious, and sometimes it's, an independent being or a family member or something. So yeah, I think it really just depends on the dream.
And so that's another area of this issue of the deceased, because a lot of times when people meet a deceased relative, they'll become lucidly aware. They'll think, oh, she
You're not
passed
supposed
away.
to be here.
Yeah, you're not supposed to be here. You passed away 5 years ago. I went to your funeral and all. But even then, you have to wonder, oh, wait a second, is this a dream symbol or is this something else? A lot of times people become really emotional and all they do is want to hug and all that kind of stuff. And that's okay. I understand that. But there's been other occasions where people have gotten valid information. Like one guy I worked with, he told me that his mom died of cancer when he was a teenager in high school. And so he was really just mad at the world, mad at God, mad at everybody. And then about 3 years after his mom passed away, one night he appeared in a dream. He became lucidly aware. And after they greeted each other, she said, I left a bunch of stuff for you with our good friends, the so-and-sos. You should call them up and get all the stuff that I left for you. And the guy was really blown away with that little bit of information. Anyway, they talk some more and he wakes up. In the morning, he calls up that family and they said, we've been looking for you for 3 years. You just disappeared. And they had boxes of this kid's childhood stuff that the mom had left with them to be sure the kid would get it. And he said, having that made him realize there's something more to life than just, you're around and then you die and that's it. Wow. He said that's when he got his head together. He started learning how to code software and started a company and the whole thing. Yeah, but that's how healing it can be too when you have those experiences.
Yeah, for sure. Whether you believe that it is their soul or just like you said, your own mind grieving, either way, it can provide you with some like life-changing healing experiences, So I think that's really incredible.
Yeah. I if you don't mind, one more story.
Yeah, I love stories.
So I was invited down to Bogota, Colombia, to give a weekend workshop on lucid dreaming. So I'm in this big hotel hall, and there's all these people sitting there. And in the very front row is this one young woman. She's probably 40 years old. You know how you see someone, they're all dressed up and everything, but you can see this pain in their face. She had all this pain in her face. And it's, you feel for them because you can tell they have pain in their face, but you don't know what's going on. Anyway, she would ask great questions. So I knew she was a good lucid dreamer. So after 3 days, the workshop comes to an end. 6 months later, they have me come back to Bogota and do another workshop. And in through the door walks this woman. But now like 70 or 80% of the pain is gone from her face. She looks younger and taller. Wow. and just so much, so incredibly different. And I walk up to her and I said, what happened to you? And through the translator, she said, that she had never thought about emotional healing in a lucid dream before until I talked about it in my workshop. And so I told everybody, how you go about it and set up a plan in advance so you could accomplish it. And so she said later that month, she had developed a plan. She became lucidly aware. She remembered she wanted to heal herself, and she called on a spiritual figure to appear. Suddenly, the spiritual figure appears. She asks for the spiritual figure to help me heal my heart. And she said the spiritual figure put out its hand, and light came from its hand into her heart. And she said she felt this incredibly ecstatic energy. And she said when she woke up, she was just a different person.
Wow.
Then she said, here's the weird thing, Robert. She said, I can still remember the traumatic incidents in my life, but now they have no pain. Now, and it's like it had all been wiped clean. But she was a totally different person. I wish I could have had a before and after picture, because you would be stunned, just
Wow.
stunned. So that's how powerful lucid dreaming can be. But a lot of things like emotional healing and physical healing, people don't get how to even approach it, and that's why I write books, is because I want to go in deep and show how people have managed to do this and how they go about it in a thoughtful way.
Yeah, wow, that is such an incredible story, honestly. It really touched my heart because yeah, that's such a thing people don't realize. Whether you're lucid or not, you can seek healing in your dreams and resolutions for things.
Right, but because one thing that I always feel bad about is someone have a nightmare in their lucid dream, and
Mm-hmm.
all. As I see it, a nightmare is trying to get our attention, trying to have us come up with a new creative response instead of running away or
Yeah.
being afraid or whatever. And it's just waiting for a new response. And so one of the best things to do is just ask the nightmare figure, who are you? What do you represent? And oftentimes when you hear, oh, I'm your fear of success, and it's like, what? I have a fear of success that's been chasing me around. Oh crap, this is the worst. So anyway, you learn what you're dealing with, but if you just run away or try to fight it or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
it'll just show up, a month or two later, and you'll just have to do the whole thing over again. So find out what it is that it represents, and then oftentimes you'll get some idea of how to work with it.
Yeah, that's definitely true. And I get that people talk about that a lot. It's like, oh, my dreams are so negative. They haunt me. I don't even want to go to sleep. This and that. And I also tell people that, but also, sometimes you got to look at your psyche as a whole and how are you feeling during your waking life? A lot of times your dreams will reflect that. And there are things that you haven't worked through. So sometimes
Right.
facing the fear in the dream, is kind of like a safe way to figure that out. Nightmares always have something to teach us as well.
Oh yeah, I remember once I met a woman at a workshop. She told me that she had this nightmare-ish figure chasing her, and so once a month she's having this nightmare. And then finally she became lucidly aware, and she decided that she was going to face it for the first time ever. And she basically looked at it and sent it so much love that it exploded into light. And she said after that she never had that nightmare again. But for the first time ever, she faced it and she just sent it love. So
That's amazing. Yeah, for sure. It can be difficult, but it takes practice. But once you're able to embrace whatever's scaring you and send it love and work yourself through it, tell yourself positive things, whatever you got to do, it does definitely get better. You mentioned earlier the power of suggestion, which I think can kind of go in with nightmares. Could you just quickly talk about what that means and how our brains register what we tell it? Because that can apply as well for getting over nightmares and, incubating a dream and stuff like that.
one thing that I learned in my lucid dreaming is that the power of belief and expectation is really important. So if you're in a lucid dream and you see somebody and you think, oh, that they're going to hurt me or something, then suddenly they'll turn around and they'll have a gun or a knife or whatever. But if you saw the same person and in the lucid dream thought, oh, I bet they're a priest or something, then they'll turn around and they'll be wearing a clerical collar and holding a Bible and all that kind of stuff. So what you begin to see really quick is that your beliefs and expectations get reflected out there in the lucid dream state. And so sometimes the problem isn't that your lucid dream is full of troublesome issues. It's that you've developed a mindset, a belief system that where you expect threats all the time or expect trouble all the time. And so really, as you get into lucid dreaming, you really have to kind of examine your own mindset. And oftentimes it'll explain why you're having the dreams you're having.
Yeah, for sure. Dreams are definitely a thought responsive environment. And I've noticed that too. When I'm lucid, if I'm super confident that I can do something, and I have no doubts in my mind, I'll be able to do it. But if I start to be like, oh, I don't know if this is going to work, and then it gets shaky and it doesn't work or something random happens. So that definitely plays a big role.
Yeah. And also, I think it shows us how we create experience. So that's how we created in the lucid dream state. If you pay attention to your dreams, you'll realize that you're doing the same thing in the dreams sometimes, that, oh, I got to run now, or I got to hide. And you realize that, oh, it's based on your mind and your fears or your beliefs or expectations. But then if you take it further, you can live lucidly and begin to see that you're doing this also in the waking state. And so if so I wouldn't go to the boss asking for a 10% raise unless I believed and expected that he'd give it to me. And until I believed and expected it, I wouldn't walk up there, because if I doubt that he's going to do it, then he will reflect that back to me. And, oh, I'm not going to give you a 10% raise. I'll give you a 3% raise and, whatever. But he won't give you a 10% raise. But if you believe it and expect it and walk in there, then all of a sudden you'll be stunned and, oh my God, I got a 10% raise. That's great.
Yeah, that's incredible. And it's such a good point, lucid living, because that awareness, when it carries over into your waking life, then it kind of starts to make sense. Like all this lucid dream work that we're doing, it has to carry over that confidence and that awareness, that, that peaceful, state of mind. Yeah, it goes both ways for sure. There are beginner lucid dreamers and then advanced lucid dreamers. If you could give like a general piece of advice for like people wanting to get more involved in lucid dreaming, what would you say?
Yeah, if you want to get deeper into lucid dreaming, I think the best way is to kind of fall in love with your dreams. Whether it's lucid dreams or regular dreams, just fall in love with the whole dream space. Because I play around a lot with my regular dreams, and I've just learned to love them. And then I'll on occasion have lucid dreams, and so it's just the cherry on top or whatever. So I think one of the best things you could do is play with your dreams, have fun with it, see where it takes you, and also try to see what it's showing you too, because sometimes some of my most powerful dreams are the ones that are just regular dreams, but the symbolism comes through and I realize, oh, I'm being shown that I need to change. I'm being shown that I need to be more creative. I'm being shown something, and that really helps.
Yeah, that's super good advice. I tell people all the time, it's more than just being lucid. It's an entire relationship with all your dreams. And the more you write down all your dreams, the more spontaneously lucid you're going to get.
Yeah, a lot of times you'll have experiences where you see something and you think, oh, that was in my dream 2 weeks ago. Oh, am I dreaming now? Oh yeah, I'm dreaming now. And so that's the beautiful thing about like keeping a dream journal, or I have a million dream stories.
I know.
This is the problem. I'll tell you one that was personally interesting. So I had this lucid dream about a year and a half ago. I'm driving down the road in my hometown, and all of a sudden I see the family business, but somebody has written on it, was funded in part by a loan from grandfather Frank, blah, 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 my mom's grandfather. And I'm driving by there, and what? Grandfather Frank gave money to help the family business get started, gave us a loan. And so at that moment, I became semi-lucidly aware. I knew this, something's weird here, because, the family business is in the wrong part of town, and no one has ever written anything like that on the side of the family business. So anyway, I became semi-lucidly aware. Anyway, in the morning, I woke up and I thought, oh my God, my grandfather Frank has been deceased for more than 40 years. But in his life, when he and his wife, they gave birth to my mom and her sister and brother and stuff, they got divorced during the Great Depression. And so my mom went to live with her mom, and they just, lived in poverty and just struggled. And so my mom always had a real difficult relationship with her father, or my grandfather, Frank. Anyway, I picked up the phone and I called up my mom, and I said, Mom, did grandfather Frank give money to help, a loan to help start the family business? And at first she goes, "Who told you that?" And I go, "I dreamt it last night. I saw it written on the side of the family business. Is this the truth?" And she goes, "Well, yes, it is true. Your grandfather gave us a loan when we were running out of money, and the whole business was going to collapse. And she goes, but I want you to know we paid back every penny of the loan." But here's what I'm trying to get across. Think of this. My grandfather has wanted kind of redemption for 40 years. So sometimes when we think of our family tree, sometimes there's issues and stuff going on there, and parts of the family aren't properly respecting that branch of the family tree, or are properly respecting part of the family tree. But I was so glad that my mom could finally level with me and kind of show that my grandfather, he wasn't a bad person. Of course, he got divorced, and there's the Great Depression and a whole lot of suffering and all. But when the family needed help, he was there to help them. But it just shows you how deep this thing of the self is. We think the self ends, we bury someone and, their self is gone. I don't think that's how it works. I think that the self goes on. And also I think sometimes these selves kind of, I don't want to say a guardian angel, but they become something like that. They become like an invisible helper, an invisible advisor on occasion. And because I can think of some strange things that have happened in my life and my brother's lives that were almost so weird that the best explanation, the simplest explanation, was a supernatural, something supernatural happened then, and the disaster was averted. So that's another thing that I just wanted people. Here's a part of the beauty of dreaming and lucid dreaming. We begin to see, that this waking reality is actually a little bit different than we imagine, and so there is spiritual help out there, but you got to be smart enough to recognize that and reach out to it, because it has to meet you halfway.
Yeah, for sure. That's incredible. Yeah, we can learn so much about ourselves, our family, our ancestry, and I tell people, just don't have any high expectations, just experience it, have intentions of what you want to accomplish, but for the most part, just take it all in. Thank you so much, not only for your contribution to the lucid dreaming field, but for coming on this podcast with me. It's been so great talking to you.
This has been a blast. I really appreciate all the questions, and thanks for letting me share all this information, because I truly love lucid dreaming.